Mark Rogers TV with instant analysis of Ohio State's impressive second half in Bloomington in coming back to defeat Indiana 49-21. The Buckeyes won their first Big Ten football game, their first overall football game of 2017, and they also won it against the spread, but it was not nearly as easy as the final score would indicate. From the start of this football game, Richard Lagow, impressive. We talked all week, a number of preview that I picked the Buckeyes to win 34-17, in which Lagow was the prime candidate in regards to being the center of our discussions, because here's a kid that threw 19 touchdowns and 17 interceptions last year. It was 5 interceptions against Wake Forest. And did you see the throws that he was making, especially in the first half against this Ohio State defense? Perfect game planning and play calling by Indiana offensive coordinator Mike DeBoard, and they had the perfect plan for an Ohio State defense that boasts maybe the best front in college football. The best because it's not only the most talented, but the deepest. 7 or 8 guys deep belong in the front, and on passing downs, event across the front to provide that quickness, that explosion, to make life very difficult on the passer. But Indiana went with the 3-step drop, ball out of the hand, quick decision, right decision, and even if a guy was covered, those Indiana receivers were making the plays against Ohio State secondary. I saw a number of comments made on social media, also on my phone, from a number of friends talking about how bad the Ohio State secondary looked in the first half. It really didn't. Those guys, they were so in sync that on most of those, probably half the throws that you saw him complete in the first half, they knew they were in sync with each other as to whether they were going to run the go, and he slipped it over the cornerback's helmet, over their shoulder as they were face guarding the receiver, or a dime, they threw the back shoulder and it was perfectly placed, or on many occasions, whether it was Simi Cobbs or Ian Thomas, the big tight end, they were out fighting Ohio State defensive backs for the football or just making great hands catches, one-handed catches. These receivers for Indiana, it was mentioned by Kirk Herbstreit during the broadcast. This is the best combination of thrower, most likely that Ohio State's going to face this season until it possibly gets to a college football playoff, outside of possibly Penn State with Trace McSorley, although they are going to be hard-pressed to put on the passing clinic that IU did, especially in the first half, but really throughout the game. The big adjustment that the Ohio State defense made in the second half was bringing the horse, and we can run defense this team in particular, and really anybody in the country. Ohio State gave up basically no yardage on the ground. The statistics in college football are ridiculous because they combine the sack yardage with the rushing yardage, so you don't get a real perspective on the rushing attacks for these teams. But basically, Indiana negative yards rushing, factor in the sack yardage, they had minimal yards rushing, like 15 yards rushing against this Ohio State defense. Just killer against the ground game. So Ohio State sense gave help to both corners, and then you started to see Lagow, you start to see him hesitate, pump it once, bring the ball down, and then the Ohio State pass rush to the second half got caused some turnovers and game over, because that gave a little bit of life to the Ohio State offense. So this offense looked like the 2016 version for most of the first half, outside of a few bursts by J.K. Dobbins, and we'll get to him in just a second. It was 2016 all over again in terms of J.T. Barrett being indecisive, with pin more of the blame on the offensive line not getting a real push early in the game. and mostly the wide receivers not being able to make plays on the football. And in the case of Paris Campbell, dropping 2 passes and one that would have given Ohio State a lead early in the second half when they were down 14-13. That proved in the interim to be decisive because the Buckeyes did not score on that drive, and Indiana stayed in the game for another 5 or 10 minutes because it was touch and go for the Buckeyes there, certainly in the first half. In the first half of the second half, as Indiana fought back after Ohio State looked like they had taken control, and the Hoosiers put together another exceptional drive to go up 21-20. So for Ohio State offensively, J.T. Barrett didn't play an exceptional game, but much of the blame goes to him for last season. That's only partially the story. It's mostly offensive pass protection. The Ohio State was more about the playmaker getting talked about it all week. A secondary that brought back everyone, the defensive end position bringing back everyone, and of course T. Scales is one of the best linebackers in the business, along with Michael Oliver, who we saw late in the game, Indiana's best defensive back. So Ohio State finally got it rolling. The passing game feeding off of the legs of J.K. Dobbins, who opened it up for the passing game. Paris Campbell, after those 2 awful drops, especially the touchdown down the middle, got free on the crossing route. So in the big games, expect to see Ohio State go back to that, because once Chris Kill gets station in his hands and can't drop it, then he's difficult to bring down because he has long strides. We saw it in the college football playoff game against Clemson. For as putrid as that game was for the Buckeyes, Paris Campbell came within that close of breaking 2 kickoffs for touchdowns against the Clemson special teams. He's that much of an athlete and long strider that if he gets out in open space, he's gone. And he went 74 yards for a touchdown. Mike Weber, 1,000-yard rusher for Ohio State last season as a freshman, on the sideline with a hamstring injury. We had heard the marvelous camp that J.K. Dobbins had against this great Ohio State defense, that he was just so elusive, so tough, so difficult to bring down, so difficult to find, and we saw it on a number of plays in this game. So J.K. Dobbins finished his day with a mere 181 yards rushing. He did run it 29 times, and I don't know that Urban Meyer wants to stay with that formula going forward. It would be nice to get Weber back and have them not necessarily split carries, because this Dobbins kid has a gear that Weber does not have. He's got elusiveness and he's got a jump cut that Weber does not have. But Mike Weber's still one of the top 3 or 4 backs in the Big Ten. It would be great to get J.K. Dobbins more like 6 or something as well going forward. Oklahoma in 10 days in Columbus. And for an offense that struggled that much, they finished with 595 yards and 49 points. Denzel Ward with an exceptional game despite giving up some pass plays. These were perfectly placed footballs and just exceptional route running. And again, the quarterback wide receiver tandem being in sync time and time again for the Hoosiers. So bright things for Indiana. Tom Allen, gotta love it. Indiana guy gets the job at the state school. The Indiana University talked late in the game. They did a piece with Lauren Rutledge on how he's just overwhelmed and blessed to be the head coach at IU. And the clips early in the game of him going out to the student section hours before the game and high-fiving, jumping practically over the wall because he was so excited for this first game against Ohio State. And you know that IU was just geared up to give this a go at home against the number 2 team in college football, a program that Indiana has not defeated since 1988. Remember Anthony Thompson and that awful Ohio State team under John Cooper with Greg Fry at quarterback, 41-7. You can tell I remember scores and remember college football history fairly well. But back to this one, bright future for Indiana if Tom Allen, and now this is the challenge to get his team back off the deck. They were so hyped and up and amped for this game. The other games aren't going to be nearly as so the next one, Indiana is a better team than Virginia, but this speaks of classic letdowns. So what does Tom Allen have as a head coach to inspire his team for the long haul? I picked IU at 7-5. I feel good about that. If they can, again, maintain focus. And if we see the pass combination of Lego and the wide receivers and the tight end Ian Thomas throughout the season, they will make a little bit of noise in the Big Ten. Ohio State, Oklahoma should be a good one again next week, although I expect to see something similar out of Ohio State that we saw the Buckeyes display in Norman last season. Need to hear from you. As you know from watching me here, I enjoy the comments, like to get back to you. We talk Ohio State football and Indiana football, so Hoosier fans step up as well. We would like to hear about your hopes here in 2017. Join me with the best bloggers and broadcasters in college football on Stitcher, iTunes, and Podbean. Just search Mark Rogers TV, and of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter at Mark Rogers TV.